Welcome to the module on clicker training for cats. These same methods can be used on any species, but this presentation will focus on tips and tricks specifically for success working with cats. There are many benefits to training. Training can be a great way to bond with a cat and boost their social skills and confidence, to teach them both fun tricks and practical skills, and to increase their chances of being adopted from the shelter. First, let's start with the foundation of training overall, and then we will add in elements, such as how and why to incorporate the clicker. The basic principle all our training will be built on is that rewarding a behavior increases that behavior. In other words, when you reward an animal for doing something, they will become more likely to do that thing again. So, if we strategically choose which behaviors to reward, we can influence and even create the behaviors we want our cat to perform. For example, if you give a cat a treat whenever they make eye contact with you, they will increase making eye contact with you. Adding a clicker. When training new behaviors, using a clicker can help the cat understand exactly what it is you are rewarding. The point of the clicker is simply to mark the moment in time that the animal does the desired behavior, so the timing is critical. Think of the click like a camera, as though you were trying to capture a photo of the behavior you are teaching. You want to click as soon as the cat shows the behavior you are looking for, and immediately follow every click with a reward. The cat will quickly learn that the click means they have earned a reward, so you now have a tool to tell them with more precision exactly when they've gotten it right. This helps them to learn faster and with less frustration. In our same example of teaching eye contact, you should click as soon as the cat looks towards you and then deliver the treat or other reward immediately after. If you were teaching a sit, you would want to click for the moment that their bottom touches the ground. A click should always be followed by a reward or else it will lose its meaning. So even if you accidentally click at not quite the right time, you should still provide the reward. Don't worry, your timing will get better with practice. Adding a cue. Once you have worked on reinforcing a particular behavior, you will likely want to add a cue or a signal that requests the behavior, such as a word or a hand signal. For example, you may use the word sit to ask for a sit, the cat's name to ask for eye contact, or hold your hand out in a particular way to request a high five. It's of course useful to have a way to ask for a particular behavior, which in training is often referred to as having that behavior on cue. In order to get a behavior on cue, simply use your cue first, then use whatever method you've been using to get the behavior. Various methods will be discussed later in this presentation. Then reward when you get it. For instance, if you're practicing attention and want to teach the cat how to look at you when you say their name, first say their name, then make a sound or movement that encourages them to look towards you, and then reward as soon as they do. With repetition, you can cut out the middle step so that eventually you simply say their name, then reward when they look. Putting it all together. The complete training loop with all the elements combined will be to give your cue, wait or ask for the behavior, click as soon as the behavior happens, then follow your click with a reward. Ta-da! Now the cat can begin piecing together what a particular cue means and performing behaviors on request. This is where the fun really begins. In the example pictured here, the trainer is presenting an open palm as their cue for high five, waiting until the cat's paw touches their hand, clicking as soon as he does, and then rewarding. In this case, the cat will soon be eagerly offering high fives anytime the trainer holds their hand out this way. Let's discuss a bit more why to use a clicker at all. There are many benefits to training with the clicker. As you now know, the clicker simply adds a marker to the training process by making consistent sound the exact moment the desired behavior happens and just before you deliver the reward. This works as a bridge between the behavior and reward to make it easier for the learner, in this case the cat, to figure out precisely what behavior to repeat. Because behaviors can happen so quickly, it is often much harder than it may seem for the animal to figure out exactly what it is that you're asking for. Let's say you wanted to teach a cat to sit, for instance. They sit down for a second, and then while you're reaching for your reward, they stand up, walk a few steps away, and meow. By the time you get the treat in their mouth, even just a few seconds later, they now may have no idea why they're getting that treat. You might end up accidentally teaching a meow every time you say sit. For something simple like a sit, they will probably eventually connect the dots anyway to get to the right answer. But with the clicker, they will succeed sooner and more often, making the training process more enjoyable and successful for both the teacher and the learner. This is especially useful for more complex behaviors or ones that happen more quickly or less often. Cats' attention span for training is usually pretty brief, so the higher rate of reinforcement that comes from using the clicker to help them gain rewards more often can make a huge difference in minimizing their frustration and encouraging them to keep engaging with you. Just like with anyone, when they enjoy learning, they're much better at it and will keep trying longer. Another benefit to using the clicker is that you do not have to be as fast in delivering your reward in order to get training results, as long as you're clicking with good timing. Without the clicker, you would need to get the reward to the cat within a second or two at most after the behavior in order for them to connect the two. But with the clicker, if you click within that second or two, you can then take as long as 30 seconds to deliver your reward. This is especially useful for training behaviors where you're using your hands, such as trimming the cat's nails, and might not always have a treat or toy already in your hand. It also means that the cat will not have to see the reward in your hand before offering a behavior, a common complaint when people train without a clicker. The process of using the clicker builds trust and betters communication between you and the cat, because each click is essentially a promise you then fulfill by following it with a reward. The cat learns that they can depend on you to follow through, and they also begin to see training as a game to play with you. Last, but certainly not least, using the clicker tends to improve people's timing and precision because they have to think more critically about what behavior they're trying to teach. Better teachers translate to better, more motivated students. Types of rewards. A reward can be anything that the cat you're working with likes. Here are the most common categories of rewards used in training. Food is often the most obvious because it can be both a powerful motivator and convenient to use, but keep in mind there are many different types of food treats, with different brands, textures, and flavors available. You are also not limited to things specifically labeled cat treats. As long as the food is safe for cats to consume, you can also use things like canned wet food, fish, small pieces of lunch meat, or even baby food. Another reward that many cats like is to play with toys like wand toys, laser pointers, or again, anything safe that the cat likes to play with. You might be surprised how many cats will be willing to work for petting and praise. So see if the cat you are working with likes to be touched or scratched in a particular place or way before trying to teach them something. Finally, functional rewards can be thought of as anything the cat wants that you can provide. There are many rewards that people may give throughout the day without even thinking about it. For example, if a cat loves to go out on their catio or eagerly awaits dinner time, you can easily incorporate training into daily life by simply asking for a behavior you want before letting them out onto the catio or putting down the dinner bowl. This is an easy way to build more two-way communication into your everyday routine. Here are some photos of a few of the types of rewards we went over. On the far left, a semi-liquid treat that comes in a tube can be a snack cats love that is easy to deliver as a reward. There's also crunchy treats, toys, petting, and in the upper right-hand corner, a creative treat delivery system is to use a syringe full of wet food to feed directly or deliver a few drops onto a surface after you click. Choosing a reward. Your training is only as powerful as the motivator you're using. So one of the most important elements of cat training is finding a reward that appeals to the individual cat you're working with. Just like people, cats' preferences vary widely. One cat might do anything for a type of food that causes another to turn up their nose. Some cats are most motivated by petting or attention, whereas others prefer play. Even the same cat may have preferences change from day to day, so the best strategy is to always have a variety of rewards to offer, and don't be afraid to experiment both across and within categories. Maybe a cat doesn't like a full body pet, but loves having their chin scratched, or could care less about Friskies, but will do backflips for a piece of tuna. I can't tell you how many times I've been told that an animal isn't food motivated, only to discover that they absolutely were if I just tried harder to find their favorite snack. So be willing to be creative and flexible in offering and selecting the right rewards. Ways to get behavior. In order for you to reward the behaviors you want, those behaviors have to happen first. When thinking about how to get the behavior you're looking for, there are 4 main techniques that work well with cats. Each one has a different set of pros and cons, and they can be used individually or in combination with one another. You can base your choice of technique on your personal preference as a trainer, the individual cat's preferences or strong suit, or the particular behavior you're training itself. If you're struggling to teach a behavior, consider switching tactics, and you may find a different technique works better to get the same behavior. In the slides that follow, we'll discuss each of the 4 techniques in depth. Capturing. Capturing is probably the best technique to start with, as it works well both for new trainers as well as cats who are new to training. So even if you are an experienced cat trainer, it's often a good idea to begin with capturing when you're working with a cat for the first time. Capturing just means waiting for a behavior to occur that you like and then rewarding it when it happens, and repeating from there. As the cat starts to realize you reward whenever they do this particular behavior, the frequency of that behavior will increase until they are doing it so often and readily around you that you can easily add a cue. So, for example, if you reward every time the cat lays down, they will start laying down more often around you, at which point you can begin to say down or give a hand signal just as they start to crouch when you can tell they are about to lay down. Eventually, they will pair this word or other signal as coming before the movement, and you can request a down specifically by name. Because you're not doing anything special to elicit behaviors, but simply waiting for them to occur on their own, capturing works best for naturally occurring behaviors, or anything the cat will do on their own, such as making eye contact, approaching you, giving a head bump, sitting, laying down, going to a particular spot, or scratching a scratching post. Benefits of capturing include the simplicity and a lack of pressure, so it is especially useful for shy or reserved cats, or cats who are easily frustrated, as you can simply start rewarding anything they start doing to get the game going and start engaging with them. You do not have to pick what behavior you will reward ahead of time, but you do want to remain consistent about only rewarding one behavior at a time to avoid confusing the cat during one training session. So if you click and treat for a paw lift, keep rewarding a paw lift for the rest of that session and not for other things. But the next day, you can reward for something totally different if you'd like. Capturing is a great technique for encouraging the cat to start offering behaviors, which will help them learn more quickly no matter which method you're using. And all it requires is patience and good timing, so it is much easier for the human to get right as well. Luring. Luring is using a reward to lure or guide the animal into the movement or behavior you want. Think of luring like using a treat magnet on the cat's nose. If you can control where their nose goes, the rest of their body tends to move with it, so you can get a lot of behaviors with luring. Although you can use a toy or even petting as a lure, luring typically works best and is easiest with food as the reward, so it's most useful when working with a food-motivated cat. The biggest benefit of luring is that you can get a desired behavior very quickly. Rather than having to wait for a cat to sit on their own, for example, if you lure their head up and slightly backwards at the right angle, as their head raises, their bottom will lower to the ground, and you can click and give the treat as soon as it does. Typically, if you raise the treat just a little higher, you can get a sit pretty, where the cat sits up on their back legs, or even higher for a high five or wave, as they will often reach a paw for the treat above their head. In this way, you can see that there are many behaviors it is easy and efficient to get with luring. The biggest downside to luring is that it's easy to become dependent on the lure if you're not careful. Because the cat is simply following the food, they may not fully connect the dots between the behavior they're doing and receiving the reward. If, for example, you can get a cat to lay down by following the treat, but they won't lay down on cue, then you haven't really taught the behavior you wanted. The way to fix or avoid this issue altogether is to do what's called fading the lure, which means you will replace the lure with the cue you want, so that the end result is the same as with any of the other techniques. You give the cue, the cat performs the behavior, you click and reward, all without the lure. There are two ways to do this. One is to use a hand signal as a cue that is similar to the movement you use with the lure to make it easy to transition from using one to the other. For instance, if you're raising your hand with a treat in it to get a high five, simply start raising your hand in the same way but without the treat after a few successful repetitions with it. This should be similar enough that the cat will still reach their paw for your hand, at which point you click and treat as before. Now, raising your hand in that way has become your cue and you don't need the lure anymore. Whenever you want a high five, just raise your hand for one and reward after. If you want to use a different cue, like a verbal one, the way to fade the lure is to use your goal cue first before the lure, repeat a number of times, and then try removing the lure in the middle. For instance, you might say down, pause a brief moment, then lower your treat to get the down, then reward when the cat has laid all the way down. After a number of repetitions, try saying down and then just wait. If the cat has figured out the pattern, then after a pause to think, they will go ahead and lay down without the lure, at which point reward them and be proud of both them and you because you have successfully faded the lure. From then on, simply use your cue down to ask for the down behavior. Fading the lure is not difficult, but it is important to be deliberate about doing so if you don't want to get stuck using the lure forever. Shaping. A super useful but slightly more involved technique is shaping. Shaping can be used in conjunction with any of the other methods and is best for more complex behaviors, like multiple step behaviors or ones that may not occur naturally or not often enough on their own to get enough opportunities to reward them. Teaching a cat to go into a carrier and stay there for some time is a great example of a behavior like this that works well with shaping. The process of shaping is to break down the end behavior you want into smaller steps and then reward for one step at a time. As they start to succeed pretty reliably at the step they are on, raise your criteria to now only reward the next step in the process. Continue until you're rewarding the final step, at which point you have your end behavior and have reached your goal. You want about an 80% success rate at one step before moving on to the next. If you wait much longer than that, the cat may get stuck on the step they're on, believing that to be the rewardable behavior and growing frustrated when the rewards stop coming as they do it. But if you move too quickly, they may not be ready and get confused. Don't worry, it's not an exact science. You can always try moving a step forward and just going back if it proves too hard. So, in the carrier example, if you want the cat to walk all the way into the carrier, sit down, and then wait there, start with taking a step towards the carrier as your step one. Reward the cat every time they start to approach the carrier, gradually rewarding for getting closer and closer to the carrier. Your next step may be reward for reaching their head into the carrier, then placing one paw in, and so on and so forth. Soon you should be rewarding only for walking all the way into the carrier, and continue to raise your criteria one step at a time until all the pieces are present. For your final steps, you'll simply be adding time to the complete behavior. In other words, for a while you should reward for the cat going in and sitting down after just 1 second, then 2 seconds, 3, then 5, 10, 20, and finally, perhaps having the cat enter and sit down, then wait for 1 minute before receiving their treat. At this point, you have a very useful behavior on cue, as your cat will happily load into a carrier and wait patiently, making trips to the vet much easier and less stressful on everyone. Targeting. The last technique we'll be discussing is targeting. Targeting is similar to luring in that you can use it to show a cat how or where you'd like them to move, making it a smart tool for teaching a variety of behaviors. Targeting relies on first teaching the cat to target or touch a specific object. This object can be anything from the tip of your finger to the eraser end of a pencil to a small plastic lid, but pick one target and stick with it for consistency and clarity to the cat. They even sell target sticks, like the one pictured below, specifically for this purpose, though you can use all sorts of household objects or even your own hands or fingers. Hold the target just in front of the cat's nose, then click and reward as soon as they reach toward it, even if they just barely touch it. After some amount of repetition, you will notice the cat's touches become much more deliberate and less hesitant. Once they are consistently giving strong boops and then looking expectantly for their reward, you know the light bulb has clicked and you can start moving the target gradually further from their nose. It does not take long before the cat will travel across a room to come touch their target. You can use this to teach them to navigate obstacles like going through a hoop, to come when called, sit pretty, or even something really neat like turning off the lights for you when you ask. Targeting is essentially a form of luring where the target becomes your lure. So just like with luring, depending on the behavior, you may want to use the target to initially get success, but then fade out the use of the target. It's a very versatile technique that can be used as a shortcut to a variety of behaviors, both simple and complex. One potential limitation is that if you have a very shy or nervous cat, they may be afraid of having an object so close to their face. So always be mindful of moving slowly, choosing your target object wisely, and perhaps reserving targeting for slightly bolder cats or those you've started to gain trust with already. As a final note, some cats may be more inclined to touch their target with a paw, whereas others will reach for it with their nose. It doesn't matter which one of these they use, so I will typically reward whichever they seem to gravitate towards first, but just make sure you're only rewarding one of those behaviors. It can get messy quickly if the cat isn't sure specifically what behavior is being rewarded, so click for either paw touches or nose touches exclusively. The only real limits to what you can teach with clicker training is time and your own creativity, but here are just a few examples of some relatively simple behaviors to get you started. Keep in mind that there's a constant turnover of cats at the shelter as they find forever homes, so even if you have taught sit many times, it may be brand new to the next cat, and every animal is their own individual who will be different to train. In other words, this list can definitely keep you busy for a while, but feel totally free to brainstorm other fun or helpful behaviors to teach if you'd like. Attention and eye contact, nose touch, head bump, sit, sit pretty, go to place like a mat or a carrier, high five, run on the wheel, go through a hoop, jump over an obstacle, spin, which is where they turn in a circle, scratch a scratching post, come when called, and lay down. Time for some examples in action. Here are some short video clips demonstrating the cat training techniques we've discussed. This is Brianna, one of our Feline Friends volunteers, teaching Cyrus how to touch paw. This later turned into a high five. Here's a bonded pair, Truffle and Fritz, who actually loved being trained together. Here they are practicing sit pretty with a wave. Their synchronized routine was so cute that they got adopted together shortly after learning it. Here's Truffle again, doing a few high fives with Brianna and a sit pretty at the end. And here's Truffle's best friend Fritz going through a tunnel using luring. This shows an example of targeting where the chopstick is being used as the target stick. This cat, Simone, took so well to training that her adopter has kept it up with her and actually now uses her as a therapy cat.
Come here. Missy, high five.
Here, targeting is used to get the cat through the hoop.
Good girl, Fritz.
These next two are a perfect example of fading the lure. First, the cat is lured to step onto the box. Then, the trainer fades the lure, replacing it with the cue, on the box.
On the box. On the box. Good girl.
Finally, here is Jolie the cat demonstrating her personal favorite trick, running on the wheel, which she learned using shaping and capturing. Here are some overall tips to help you as you start delving into the wonderful world of clicker training cats. As briefly mentioned earlier in this presentation, the attention span of most cats isn't very long. It takes a lot of concentration to learn something new, and you'll be surprised by how quickly the cats get tired and start losing focus. It's always better to keep sessions short and sweet, ending on a success that you can come back to and build on in your next session. It's very tempting to keep pushing further when you and the cat are doing well, but try to quit while you're ahead so that both you and the cat are eager to come back to training, rather than waiting until things start to decline. Remember to have with you a variety of rewards you can offer and pay attention to what each cat seems to like best. You can strategically switch between reward values, such as giving one type of treat for a trick the cat already knows, and using their very favorite treat for a brand new or harder behavior, or you can simply mix up your rewards randomly to keep the cat interested. You may love chocolate cake, but after 3 pieces of it, be ready for something salty. Your cat might love to eat, but get full and prefer to play after a few rounds of snacks. It does help to have a training plan before you start a session, but to always be flexible about adjusting that plan based on the animal in front of you. Moods change, environments change, and the cat you're working with right now might not be the one you expected. They might be different than another cat, or even different than they were when you last worked with this cat. Be open to making adjustments. Maybe you planned to shape going into a carrier and we're going to reward the cat for taking one step towards it, but they go running all the way in as soon as you put the carrier down. Or you might have a grand plan of teaching jumping through a hoop, but find a cat crouched nervously and hesitant to engage, so you decide to capture gentle nose touches instead to encourage them to come out of their shell. And if something goes so differently that you're not sure how to adjust in the moment, never hesitate to just take a break and come back to training later after some time to reevaluate. Please feel completely encouraged to ask for help. Between more experienced volunteers, adoption center staff, the volunteer coordinator, and the dog training team, all who use these same training methods, there are tons of people on the Paws Forever team who are able and eager to answer your questions and work with you to hone these skills. It can feel overwhelming, but you are not alone, so never hesitate to reach out with questions or ask for more support. Even if you ask a staff member and they don't know the answer, they can find someone who will. And remember that everyone started off as a beginner and probably experienced the same frustrations or confusion at some point that you might be going through, so they are more than happy to help. We're all on the same team of benefiting the animals. In a similar vein, don't be afraid to try. You will learn through trial and error and practicing, so don't feel like you have to already be an expert before giving these techniques a try. One of the best things about positive reinforcement training is that you can't mess up anything too seriously. If your timing or mechanics are off, the worst that will happen is that the cat gets free treats, which is still a positive association with people. Trust us, they won't mind. As long as both you and the animals are still having a good time, you really can't go wrong. One of the things that will help you succeed is to break behaviors into smaller steps to make each part of the process easier. If you're having trouble getting your goal behavior, brainstorm how you can break it down into smaller elements, then start with the first one. Often, even a simple behavior might have multiple movements or parts that can be separated out for more success. It's better to start at first grade level, then move up to second and third after succeeding, than to throw the cat into a college level difficulty and then have to back up when they fail. Last but by no means least, patience, persistence, and creativity will take you far in the world of training. Keep trying and you'll have kitty Olympians in no time. Most important, have fun and thank you for taking the time and effort to enrich our cats. You will make such a difference in their lives. Finally, we owe a huge thank you to the Jackson Galaxy Project, which brought the Cat Positive Pro program to Paws Forever. In the spring of 2018, staff and volunteers participated in Cat Positive Pro, which taught them all about clicker training with cats, including everything you learned in this presentation and more. The hard work and dedication of our volunteers and staff paid off with such great outcomes that we decided to keep up cat training in the shelter, which is where this module and you come in. Many of the volunteers who participated in the original Cat Positive program are still feline friends today, so feel free to ask around and get their help if you're interested. And all of the videos included in this presentation came from our time in the program, so another big thanks to the staff and volunteers who not only participated, but also generously agreed to be filmed.